Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are digging into one of the most incredible stories in Islamic tradition, the miracle of the splitting of the moon. We're going to look at the sources to understand exactly what is said to have happened.
And it all starts right here, with this incredibly direct and powerful verse from the Quran. The chapter is even named Al-Qamar, which means the moon. This one line really just kicks the whole thing off, setting the stage for a miracle that's been talked about for centuries.
So this event, the splitting of the moon, isn't described as just some random, bizarre thing that happened in the sky. No, according to the sources, it was a very specific sign, a miracle performed by the Prophet Muhammad for a very specific audience.
We know it's dated to the Prophet's time in Mecca. But the really crucial part here, the thing you gotta understand to get its weight in the tradition, is this term mutawātir. Basically, it means the story wasn't just told by one or two people. It was reported by so many independent witnesses that within the tradition, it's considered impossible for them to have all made it up. It's seen as a historical certainty.
You see, the miracle didn't just happen out of the blue. The sources are clear that it was a direct response to a challenge. A group of powerful polytheists in Mecca basically decided they were going to put the Prophet's claims to the ultimate test.
And we're not talking about just a few random people here. These were the big names, the leaders of the Quraysh tribe, the very people who were most opposed to his message. They came to him with a demand that they must have thought was completely and utterly impossible.
And they were very specific. They didn't just say, do a miracle. They said, split the moon and put one half over this mountain and the other half over that mountain. So the Prophet put a condition on it. If I do this, will you believe? And they said, yes, we will. The lines were drawn.
So, what happens next? Well, the tradition says that on the 14th night of the lunar month, when the moon was full and bright, something extraordinary occurred.
After praying, the Prophet was told his prayer was accepted. He then simply pointed at the moon, and it split. Just like they asked, one piece appeared over Mount Abu Qubais, the other over Mount Qur'anic. And he called out to everyone there, believers and challengers alike, telling them to witness it.
Now you'd think that would be it, right? Challenge met, promise kept. But instead of honoring their word, their immediate reaction was to accuse him of sorcery. They didn't say we didn't see it, they said this is just some powerful magic trick.
But then they came up with a pretty clever test. They figured, okay, maybe he could cast a spell on us here in Mecca, but there's no way his magic could reach travelers on the roads far away. So they decided to wait for the next caravans to arrive and ask them what they saw.
And what happened? According to the sources, every single group of travelers they asked, coming from all different directions, said the same thing. Yeah, we saw it. The moon was split in two. Their own test confirmed the miracle. And yet, they still refused to believe, just doubling down on the magic explanation.
Okay, so this brings us to the really big questions, the ones you're probably thinking right now. If the moon literally split in two, why is this story in every single history book on the planet? Why didn't the Romans or the Chinese write about it?
That's the elephant in the room, right? And it's a question that the theological sources actually anticipate and address head-on. They offer a whole series of explanations for this apparent silence from the rest of the world.
So let's get into it. Let's break down the reasons that are given for why a miracle this huge might not have been recorded everywhere. And it starts by circling back to that word we heard earlier.
Right. Mutawātir. This concept is so central to the argument. Think about it this way. How do you know for sure that, say, Australia exists if you've never been there? You know because countless independent people have reported it. It's an overwhelming consensus. For Islamic scholars, the reporting of the moon splitting has that same level of certainty.
So the argument is that this wasn't meant to be a global light show. It was a sign for a specific group of people. And there are a lot of practical reasons why others wouldn't have seen it. For half the world, it was daytime. For much of the other half, people were asleep. It happened quickly, it wasn't up there for hours, maybe it was cloudy. And think about it, if you were the only one in your town who saw it, would you even believe your own eyes? Who would believe you?
And while there might be silence outside the tradition, inside it, the belief is rock solid. This chart kind of visualizes that. From the people who are actually there, to Quran experts, to theologians, you name it, there's a complete consensus across the board that yes, this happened.
All right, so that brings us to the second huge question. If the moon was physically torn in two and then put back together, shouldn't there be, a giant scar? Shouldn't our amazing telescopes be able to see the seam?
This is where things get really interesting, because the answers provided move from history into theology, and then maybe, just maybe, into something modern astronomy has actually seen.
First, the theological answer, and it's pretty straightforward. A miracle, by its very nature, doesn't have to follow the laws of physics. The power that could split the moon in the first place could certainly put it back together perfectly, leaving no trace behind, kind of like how a deep cut on a body can heal without a scar.
But the explanation doesn't just stop there. The sources also point to a specific, real feature on the moon's surface that some have suggested could be a physical clue.
It's this thing called Hadley Rille, and it's a real place. It's a massive channel, basically a long cleft on the moon that's about a mile wide. The Apollo 15 astronauts actually explored it, and some scholars have pointed to this very feature as a possible physical remnant of the split.
Now, and this is super important, the source itself is very careful to say that this connection is disputable. This isn't presented as definitive proof. It's more of an interesting observation, especially since geologists have found many similar channels or rilles on the moon.
And that's really where this leaves us, with a fascinating story of a divine sign, backed by an enormous amount of historical testimony within its tradition, that today sits at this crossroads of faith, history, and science. It makes you ask a fundamental question. When you look up at the moon, what do you see? A geological feature, or maybe the healed scar of a miracle?